puppies will put them to sleep. And sleep they did, didn't they? Good evening everyone, and welcome to Smoking Truth TV. My name is Nada, and we're on episode 19 today, and if you didn't know already, I called this one Poppycock Buffoonery. Before we go any further, let me just get this out of the way. How dare you? Oh, I dare all right, especially with what I have to say today. Besides, wasn't it Greta Thunberg the one to tell us in a roundabout way that it's all about money and fairy tales that run this so-called eternal economic growth? I know I go off on a tangent sometimes, but this is crazy. I'm not even 5 minutes into the show and I've already gone off on Greta Thunberg. Anyway, no long intro today, so instead, let's get started. You may recall a few videos back, I said something on the lines of, everyone holds some truth within them. Well, here is some evidence of what I was trying to say. Some of you may recognise this Jester Mason who goes by the name of Jim Davison, but did some of you know that he exposed the Royal British Legion and their poppy scandal? Here, let me show you what I mean. In this video from 2 years ago, Jim Davison tells you and shows you some documents stating that the Royal British Legion has over £70 million in their reserve, and that's not including all their buildings or assets. A few weeks ago, Jester Jim releases another video where he brings this topic up again, this time saying the reason he doesn't wear a poppy is because the Royal British Legion has over £200 million in reserve, so why aren't they distributing that money where it is needed, or helping out smaller charities? Going off them statements, I would have to say the man has a valid point, wouldn't you agree? No, Nada hasn't lost it. I know all these charities are just one big scam, and I know I have mentioned Greta Thunberg and Jim Davison, but all this leads to somewhere. Besides, even though this subject is quite a sinister one, we have to try and bring some kind of light along with us, do we not? I'm also fully aware that old Jimmy boy has shown us just who he works for a bunch of times, so I don't think I need to cover that. So instead, let's keep digging. So according to Mr. Davison, they have over 200 million in reserves, but I have a feeling there is a lot more than that. This article says Armed Forces charities sit on reserves of 275 million. And this article says Armed Forces charities sit on reserves of 275 million and continued to say Britain's 10 biggest military charities have combined assets of £1.4 billion and reserves of 275 million, prompting concerns, and you can go and read the rest for yourselves if you want to, but are you beginning to see the bigger picture here? Besides, I have come to the understanding that most of the money that is collected from the Royal British Legion is used to go back into the military for weapons, bullets, tanks, etc. And the money that is donated to the people is a very small amount. But I guess some people will start saying I'm putting my own views and opinions together, and we can't have that now, can we? So instead, let's see what else we can find out about this so-called Poppy Day, or for a better term, Remembrance Day, lest we forget. Oh, I will remember all right, and I definitely will not be forgetting either, but let's continue. Looking at the Evening Standard newspaper, it states, End of war. Germany signs our terms and fighting stopped at 11 o'clock today. This article says, the war that did not end, at 11 AM on the 11th of November. They certainly got that title right, didn't they, about it not ending? It absolutely didn't end, and the way I see it, World War I was just a stepping stone to incorporate everyone into being a slave. But let's continue. Every year we remember the guns of the First World War cease firing at 11 AM on the 11th of November 1918. This article reads, Armistice Day, World War I ends, November the 11th, 1918. At the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, the Great War ends. Is anyone else beginning to see something familiar occurring here? Let's break this down a little before moving forward. So we're told that World War I ended at 11 AM on the 11th day on the 11th month. Just adding them numbers together we get the Masonic number of 33. But not only that, as some people have come to understand that November is actually the 9th month of the year, so wouldn't this indicate that the war stopped on the famous date of 9/11? But wait, there's more, because we're also told the year World War I ended was 1918. If we take the numbers 191 from that date, we get that same date again as in 9/11, and with the 8 left over, we see the same repeated Masonic number as in 33. It's beginning to come to my attention that most of what we're told about the First World War is saturated in Freemasonry, Jesuit occult practices, and the mysterious Illuminati. We're also told that this day is a day for remembrance, a day to remember the heroes that died in the war. But in all honesty, I have to disagree. Now don't get it twisted, I absolutely feel sorrow and heartache for the masses and masses of people, men, women and children, that all died by the hands of their authority figure through lies and propaganda. So no, I will never forget. Now you don't have to agree with me, but in my own humble opinion, if there were such a thing, as in that two countries just so happen to have a disagreement, then I would rather see something like this. Yup, if there's going to be any fighting, then why don't the two opposing sides go at it head to head in a boxing ring and slug it out? But we all know how the saying goes, no rich man will ever fight, especially when they can pay others to do it for them. It's also my opinion that most of the men and young lads that were killed in World War I were persuaded into joining and signing up to the war. And when that ran thin, the people were eventually drafted into a war in a way I can only describe as men being led like lambs to the slaughter. Here, let me show you what I mean. As we look through some enticing posters from World War I, this one screams, "Britons, join your country's army. God save the king." Yeah, very British. Just look at this chap pointing his finger as if saying, "We want you." Sorry pal, but you're not sucking my life energy force. This next one's a little different. It says, register for the war. First off, no thanks, but let's continue. All male persons should have attended their 21st birthday, and who shall not have attended their 21st birthday will present themselves at their respective voting places and re-register on Tuesday, 5th day, June 1917. So as we can see, this one is aimed at the younger men and early adulthood. This next one is just a blatant act of authority and simply tells you to stand in line, step into your place and do as you're told. Before we move on to the next poster, some of you are probably wondering why I mentioned about them sucking your life energy from you. Well, check this one out for an energy emotion puller. What are you prepared to do? Don't bring shame upon your family name. How do you want your wife to view you? Prove your loyalty to the king. Recruit now. Be British boys. Join at once. Fight for the dear old flag. With people's consciousness attacked so hard, it's no wonder why many people fell into this kind of trance. Really? I mean, is this really what they were pushing back then? Man, people were truly sucker punched into the propaganda. Well, to be honest, it's no different to the propaganda today regarding all the cocktails given by the white coats, but I don't have time to go off on another tangent, as we have a lot more to get through. This newspaper from the Pittsburgh Post had this to say, draft drawings for the Great National Army completed. So basically they were already planning to incorporate everyone. Beginning to sound familiar again. And as I had done most of the legwork already by playing off the people's emotions with their sinister campaigns that got them to sign up in the first place, it wasn't going to be hard for them to push the people into submission. This article reads, World War I draft registration records. All men in the United States between the ages of 18 and 45 were required by law to register for the draft throughout 1917 and 1918. And here we have an article from the famous British brainwashing company. It says, conscription in World War I, in March 1916, the Military Service Act imposed conscription on all single men aged 18 to 41. This one's quite shocking to me. It says, most famously in Britain, 2,675,149 men volunteered, the vast majority in the first half of hostilities. Holy spitballs, that's a lot of people. I mean, that's just crazy, don't you think? I find myself agreeing with this man, Mr. Bernard Lawson, as we look at this article. It's basically saying Bernard Lawson was one of the 16,000 people who refused to fight as conscription laws had already enlisted 2.5 million. And as we can see here, during the whole of the war, conscription had raised up to some 2.5 million men. Again, that's an insane amount of people. Now, I don't know what part of the realm some of you are watching this from, and maybe you can let me know in the comments, but it seems to me that Britain is one of the biggest when it comes down to worshipping this state, with all its imposing royal forces, alongside the elite class of the royal family. I mean, everywhere you go there are posters as well as TV stations that are pushing their emotional captions and campaigns upon the people, and like I said before, we will remember them, and some of us will never forget. That also goes for all the other wars that were to follow. All these men were sold a package of lies and were believing they were fighting against a different country for the greater good. It most probably would have been a completely different story if the people of the world were all educated from an early age regarding the true nature of where we live. And maybe if they knew that there was a certain group of evil men out there who likes to act as a controlling entity that wants nothing more but to manipulate you into their one world religious government for their own entertainment, well, I'd like to think that we most probably would have had some kind of peace. But then again, maybe this was all meant to be. Maybe this all had to take place, and it is now down to the future generation to unveil, aka us. I know this is getting quite heavy, and I know some of what I'm saying today may have hit some nerves out there. But as I said before, I'm not a professional, I have no degree, I'm just a man in this realm who has taken it upon myself to try and search for the truth. The best and only advice I can give to you is, go and look at all the evidence you can find and work out for yourselves what is true and what is fiction. Now this next part I nearly left out, as it came across I'm a bit frustrated. Well, I guess a part of me is, but can you really blame me? Anyway, here goes. Do you recall me saying just a few moments ago that it seems that Britain is huge on this event? Well, could it be down to pride with a hint of shame? Here, I'll let this article explain. Almost 250,000 boys under the age of 18 fought in the British Army. It continues with the British Army of World War I era. For example, it has been estimated that around 250,000 boys under the age of 18 fought and died for their country. The youngest authenticated British soldier in World War I was 12-year-old Sidney Lewis, who fought at the Battle of Somme in 1916. Looking at the way people act on this island just shows that the people are in a mental state of pain, sorrow, shame and pride when it comes down to this event. It also shows that the government has managed to pull all the people's strings of emotions that has now left the people in a state of denial, and the controllers have now created a state of indoctrination. The following collage should clear some of this up. This is Britain, Woody, the land of the indoctrinated. Even I'm a hero in their eyes. If you believe that nobody is trying to brainwash you, it's too late. What if I told you everything that you were taught in school was heavily revised to favour your own nation's agenda while hiding its crimes, and in doing so frustrated an unrealistic sense of false patriotism used to manufacture your allegiance to a corporate entity masquerading as your government? All these 9/11/33 dates seem to all be about slavery and sacrificing to some kind of creepy self-proclaimed god. I'm sorry, but that's not how I roll, and I have a strong feeling it's down to people like us to be able to free the enslaved. Now, I was going to save this next part for another video, so just to be brief, no, I don't believe the official story about September the 11th, and I also don't believe that any planes hit any buildings. To be honest, I have come to understand that September the 11th was nothing more than a controlled demolition that was intended to generate fear, panic, depression, anger and sadness. Another emotional puller, an event deliberately created to turn it into another worshipping day so it could be added to our ever-growing list of dates on our Roman calendar. So whenever I see a poster like this, Least We Forget, 11th of November, or a poster like this, September the 11th, Honour and Remember, I see that there is nothing new under the sun. But before I break these dates down, just bear in mind that on September the 11th, there was 3 buildings that fell that day. So as we talked about earlier, World War I ended in 1918 on the 11th day of the 11th month at 11 AM. Deciphering all these dates, including the times given to us, we see nothing but the Masonic numbers as in the 9, 11 and 33 codes. Well, the same could be said regarding September the 11th. This event happened on September the 11th, 2001, where 3 buildings fell. On this occasion, we already have the date of 9/11, so if we now take the 2 and the 1 from the year date, we have 3, and adding the amount of buildings that fell that day would also give us the Masonic number of 33. But not only that, the Twin Towers themselves were also demolished 33 years after them being erected. This can't all be a coincidence, surely. I know a lot of people will just look at this part of the video and think to themselves, these are just numbers and don't prove a thing. Well, yes they are just numbers, but the elites always use these numbers in their occult practices, and when it comes down to these big world events, these numbers are always present. Another code you may see pop up a lot of times when looking into these subjects is Order 66 and the Beast 666. Here, let me show you what I mean. Another day people are directed to be reminded to worship is D-Day, and this event just so happens to have taken place on June 6, 1944. Just by looking at these dates of D-Day, we see that it is June 6, 1944. Well, according to the Roman calendar, June is the 6th month. So basically, this event took place on the 6th day of the 6th month, giving us the code Order 66. Then, if we add the year date numbers together, we will notice that we get the number 18. And how many 6's add up to 18? D-Day wasn't even on my radar when I started putting this video together, until I struck up a conversation with a fellow brother in truth on YouTube called Awakening Soul Dyer. And after he pointed this out to me, I just had to put it in the video. If you don't know who Awakening Soul Dyer is, then it's definitely worth your time checking out his channel. He posts up about all sorts of subjects and brings some very informative information to the table, so big shout out to him for this part of the video. Of course, there are more codes surrounding D-Day. For instance, D is the 4th letter of the alphabet, so using the 2 D's in D-Day, we get the Masonic number of 44, and 44 equals to the word kill. Just like with anything in this realm, the more digging you do, the more you will find. With everything I have shown here today, are you beginning to see why I called this episode Poppycock Buffoonery? Poppycock meaning senseless talk, nonsense, trivial talk, nonsense, stuff and rubbish, foolish talk, nonsense, senseless talk. And buffoonery, the art and practice of a buffoon, low jest, ridiculous pranks, vulgar tricks and postures, foolishness, silliness, the behaviour expected of a buffoon, basically acting like a clown. Now don't get me started, as I haven't got time to go all into that today. Besides, it's not too hard to see who some of these clowns are, as they love to hide in plain sight. So let's get back on topic. Years ago, I used to wear what's called as the white poppy. This is something I don't do now, especially after finding out all about these propagated scandal events. But as we're approaching the end of the video, I will just throw you a few nuggets of information for you to do further research on regarding the white poppy. Well, if you're interested, of course. The symbolism of the white poppy: remembering all victims of war, creating a culture of peace, building a peaceful future, challenging materialism and the glorification of war. Sounds all good on the outside, doesn't it? But even with how good it sounds, it's still pushing the mainstream narrative and does not expose the people responsible for brainwashing innocent people into a war of absolute slaughter. Here, check out what this article has to say, and if your eyes are open you will find it just as shocking as I did. White poppies for Armist, there are to be white poppies as well as red next Armistice Day. This was announced at yesterday's meeting of the Women's Cooperative Guild Jubilee Congress. Miss Eleanor Barton, the secretary, told the Daily Herald that the Central Committee adopted the white poppy idea as a peace demonstration. The British Legion, she said, had been asked to provide white poppies, the proceeds from their sales to go into the red poppy funds. Although this says at the bottom the British Legion had not replied, how does this make it any different if the sale money is just going towards the same thing? It seems to me that they wanted to merge the red poppy and the white poppy into something like this. And if they achieved their goal, it would just generate another illusion for confusion. Anyway, I think I'll stop there for today. If any of what I have said resonates with you, then please hit the thumbs up button and also subscribe for future content. As I've said before, this is an ever learning channel, so if you have any thoughts or interesting information on the topics I've spoken about today, then please leave your comments below. In a world we live in today, it's becoming harder and harder to be able to trust anyone, and trying to find the truth is as rare as finding a pearl in a clam. But if the good people of the world can come together and try and figure some of this mess out, I'm sure one day we will have some peace and clarity. So until next time, take care out there, brothers and sisters, and I will speak to you all again soon for some more Smoking Truth TV.
What we've got here is failure to communicate. Some men you just can't reach. So you get what we had here last week, which is the way he wants it. Well, he gets it. I don't like it any more than you may.